show up and I'll get up at the podium. We have our Landlord Expo Multi-Housing Extravaganza coming up May 18th. It's from 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. It's free. Port Mason, it's Gallery 308. So that's May 18th, late morning to 4 p.m. So that's sort of like our trade show, and that's going to be a fun event. It'll, again, all in person, so that's a good thing. The other thing I want to remind you, we're going to talk tonight later on about the market survey. The market survey report that will be referenced is on the SFAA website, so everyone can access it from there, and we'll do that. So Frank and I are here, and we're going to answer the questions that you submitted. The first topic, Frank, maybe just do kind of a conversational piece here.
All right, sure.
Let's first talk about the unit registry, because that's super important. As I think we know, we had to have everything registered by a week and a half ago, March 1st, although it's not the end of the world if you didn't.
No, it's not. I'm Frank Kim. I'm one of 3 panelists, but I'm the only one who showed up. So we're doing this on a question
On the fly. Can you hear us now?
Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. Okay, so we got quite a few questions about the registry. The registry was supposed to be done by March 1, but I understand there's going to be 30 days to complete it. Now, there are some questions here. Number 1, is it illegal not to register your unit? Technically, you're in violation of the San Francisco registry law. What are the repercussions? Well, there's no fine or criminal penalty. The real penalty is you will not be issued a rent increase license, which means you can't increase rent until you register your unit. So that's the biggest stick that the city is using right now.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. In terms of the vacancy tax, some people are saying, why should I register if I have to pay a vacancy tax? It is correct that once you register, they will charge you the tax. I don't know what the penalty is going to be if you don't register a vacant unit, because you're not going to be raising rent on a vacant unit. So I guess you could hold off for a while. Although don't say I told you that. This is all brand new actually, and there hasn't been any cases on this rent registration or on the vacancy tax matter. I know one person asked if there was going to be an appeal or what the status of the appeal on Prop M is. At this point, nobody knows.
Well, we filed a lawsuit that was filed and served about a week ago or 10 days ago. The city's not responded yet. They don't have to. They have a number of days in which to do that. But the challenge to Prop M was filed. Very good pleadings. Laid everything out. There were 3 individual plaintiffs or groups of plaintiffs that had very, in my opinion, compelling stories as to how imposition of the vacancy tax would, in essence, force them to sell their homes. And we'll see what happens. We'll see what the city's response is. I'm just curious, show of hands here of anyone who has not registered their rental units. Yeah, it's interesting. We had a rent board meeting last night. In fact, it was the first in-person meeting 3+ years. And our executive director reminded us that it's a relatively low compliance turnout based on their internal statistics. They believe that it's like 15-20% or so of the rental units have been registered, with the balance not being. So it seems the majority have not. But to echo Frank's point, one fear we have is that if we don't register, it takes us, a simple vote of the Board of Supervisors to amend the rent law to possibly impose more stringent penalties. Like they haven't penalized us enough, right?
Right.
All right, so that's the first topic. Frank, I'm going to go down some of the questions we have here. Well, actually, go ahead. If you want to deal with the subtenancy issue, that's fine.
Well, this is a question we talked about. When a tenant breaks a lease, do you need to ask the same rent for the new tenant's 12 months lease? So I guess the issue here is you're trying to get the money from the tenant who broke the lease for the rest of his lease term. There is something called mitigation of damages, and the court requires that you try to mitigate the damages to the best of your ability, which means that if the rent was, let's say, $1,000 a month, and you're asking for 1,000 in a market where the rent has dropped to 800, the argument would be that you should just ask for the market rent, get the 800, and then charge the difference to the tenant. To try to get above market rent and then just sit there and say the tenant owes us, they could challenge that. So I would argue that you should base the new rent based on the conditions of the market at the time.
Frank, I see that you're down at courthouse a lot, and I know people in this room are gonna wanna know the status of where we are with eviction proceedings, you know, what our housing court or real property court is allowing, and what the state of our backup or backlog is. You wanna speak to that a little bit?
Well, there's a huge backlog for trials, that's for sure. There's a huge backlog because there's been a lot of cases that piled up. The court is allowing evictions and for non-payment of rent. And since the moratorium has ended some time ago, there should be no problem with you serving a 3-day notice and filing a UD and pursuing an eviction. As far as the trial call, it's hit and miss. I mean, sometimes you get like 18 cases on the calendar and 1 or 2 courtrooms available, or none.
You know, it's interesting though, in the recent press, we saw that Dean Preston, as the press calls it, extended the eviction moratorium. So I get calls and people asking me, there's a moratorium, but really it's not. And that legislation is in many ways benign. You want to elaborate?
Right. There is no binding moratorium on the court. The court is not accepting any moratoriums right now in San Francisco. Now, in Alameda County, it's different. There is a moratorium in Alameda County, and I believe that's going to expire at the end of April. But up until now, no residential landlords have been able to evict for non-payment in Alameda County, if you can believe that. From 2020 until now, they've not been able to collect the rent and not been able to evict.
So the Preston law is what, an affirmative defense? The tenant can come into court and say, you can't evict me because I have COVID hardship still, and therefore don't evict me for this unpaid rent. Is that how you read it?
Pretty much, but they're not bringing it up lately. I
Not
haven't seen it.
it.
Or at least in the ones that answer my complaint, they haven't.
Got a few here and there. All right, go ahead. What's your next question?
Let's see what we have here. An elderly couple wants to avoid creating a tenancy for a live-in caregiver residing in a different condo than the elders currently reside. Well, a parallel example would be a residential manager, for example. You could have a contract with a residential manager where they occupy a unit, but that occupation is part of their job contract, basically. And we've been able to evict residential managers who lose their job, basically. We're talking about full-time managers, not a tenant who just part of the time collects the rent check for you. You can prepare a contract that would give you sufficient rights to evict the caregiver if the condo is provided solely as a perk of the contract itself. I mean, there are problems sometimes when you say that we'll pay you $3,000 a month, but $1,500 will go to rent for the condo. Then you're stuck because you're actually specifying a rent for the condo. The proper way to do it would be to say something like $3,000 a month salary. The residents use it free while you're employed. That way they don't have a tenant right as a paying tenant to stay there after their job is terminated. I would say that would be the safer way.
But of course, if you have an existing tenant that you convert to a resident manager, then that person becomes a tenant upon termination.
Right, they don't lose their tenancy rights, but we're talking about a caregiver. I assume that they hired to move into the condo to care for them.
Go ahead, next question.
Can I ask a question? Can I go back to the question on the eviction for non-payment of rent?
Sure.
Because I'd like, if you could clarify that. My understanding was you cannot evict for non-payment of rent. You can only go to small claims court.
Not true.
Really?
From April 2022 onwards, so for the past year, we've been doing processing the non-payment for rent evictions. Now, there are defenses, as we were talking about, and one defense that's gotten a lot of play in the press recently is they call it a moratorium, but it's not. That's, again, I'll use the term fake news, how's that for comedic? But anyhow, that's fake news. There's no moratorium in the city and county of San Francisco.
Wow, okay.
What there is the ability for a tenant to come to court and say, well, don't evict me for this because it's COVID-induced hardship. However, as Frank noted, that defense is almost never used.
No, I haven't seen it in any of the answers that's filed by.
Oh, okay.
The sheriff's department's been very busy for the last year here.
Okay. Thank you.
How many people are legally allowed in a one-bedroom apartment? Well, I mean, the health code, well, the rule of thumb, and this is not a firm rule, is generally we go by 2 per bedroom plus 1 for these units. So if you have a 1-bedroom, I would say 3 would be reasonable. But again, the health department decides these on a case-by-case basis. I mean, if you have a 3,000 square foot home with 1 bedroom, I don't think that 3 would be the maximum. So there's no real clear answer.
There really isn't. No, you're right. Frank, I have a security deposit deduction question.
Okay, sure.
I get these all the time too from the
All right.
property managers especially. And that is, I mean, we really don't have a definitive standard of what constitutes unreasonable wear and tear or normal wear and tear.
Right.
Some places do, but not here. And question is can a landlord charge a full amount at the full cost to restore hardwood flooring where the damage is in one room, but yet in order to properly restore the floors, in terms of the coloration and the sheen and whatnot, you have to sand down and redo the floors throughout the entire apartment. What's your thought on that?
Well, I think that it should be prorated based on the square footage. I just don't see a court awarding you the full refinishing of the entire house if only one room is damaged.
The other question, which again leads to what somebody just asked us, we do have small claims remedies, don't we, for unpaid rent?
Yes, we do. In fact, the $10,000 cap has been removed for rent that was owed during the COVID period. So if you have past due rent that was owed during the moratorium that you have not been able to collect and there's no pending rental assistance on that rent, you could sue them in small claims court for whatever amount.
In fact, until 2026, right? We've got that for a couple, three more years.
That sounds about right,
Yeah.
but you might as well do it now.
Right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, I know one landlord that got a small claims judgment against a tenant and then negotiated the tenant to leave in lieu of paying the judgment without having to do a UD.
That's good.
Yeah.
What else you got?
Let's see what else.
I can answer you.
Oh, no, there's one about, I guess, garage. Tenant has multiple cars and they're in and out several times a day. There's too much wear on the spring bar, and I limit one car in to enter the garage only. I guess the question is, if you rented a one-car space as part of your lease, they're entitled to the space. It doesn't specify how many cars can use the space, and I don't know if you could really limit them to one car. I mean, as long as only one car occupies the garage, that would be my thought.
I agree with you. Go ahead. Well, let me ask this while you're looking. During COVID and all that, we had people there in their apartments all the time, and the noise complaints went crazy, right? You saw that?
Right, yeah.
So what do you do? What's your kind of strategy, if you will, when you have a situation where somebody's complaining and saying, hey, my neighbor is creating unreasonable levels of noise, I can't sleep, or whatever the situation is? How do you go about addressing that? Especially now we have that 10-day notice rule.
Right. Part of the problem there is that a lot of times it's issues between the two tenants, personal issues that cause these problems, because if there is a noise issue, most tenants tend to talk to each other and try to work something out. But when it reaches the point where, for example, both tenants write to the landlord saying, you've got to kick the other person out because they're creating a nuisance. And that happens quite often.
All the time.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we always recommend is why don't you do some mediation? The rent board used to do mediation.
We still do.
And we recommend it.
It's free.
Yeah, they fill out a form, they submit it, and then they'll schedule a mediation.
Yeah.
And by offering that to them, at least you're trying to mitigate your involvement in this case, because you really don't wanna be in a situation where each tenant is saying, I'm gonna go after you, I'm not gonna pay my rent because you're not doing anything to solve the noise.
Right, and we see this more and more. What about the mechanical solutions, as I call them, going out there, looking at carpeting, rugs, that kind
Well,
of
yeah, I mean, one thing you could do is offer to install carpeting or
Yeah.
soundproofing in between the wall. But, you know, when tenants have problems with each other, no matter what you do, sometimes they're not satisfied. I mean, we've had cases.
Amen.
Cases where we put in padding and carpeting and things like that, and then the other tenant claims that at 3 a.m. they're jumping up and down.
Right,
You know,
weird.
it doesn't make
Yeah.
any sense, you know, but these things happen, and it's best not to be involved personally, to offer them solutions. If you offer them soundproofing, you offer them mediation, you know, I don't see what more you can do at that point.
But it's interesting, and you've sat through on a couple of these meetings. We have once a year or so, we have the, I think we're doing it again this year, the tenant attorney panel. So we invite 3 of our tenant attorney
Right,
colleague
right.
friends, and they come here wherever we're at, and they speak on various issues. And every time they speak, the one issue that comes up is what we just talked about.
Right.
And their big theme, I guess, is that the owner has to at least be responsive. They
Right.
cannot take sides or get involved, but one of our friends, Andy Wesley, always says, if I'm gonna go after an owner, it's gonna be because that owner was completely non-responsive and basically said, not my problem, you guys deal with it.
Right, so as long as you respond and try to work something out, it's not your obligation to make it work between the 2 tenants.
Yeah.
As long as you make the effort. Here's a question for you, David.
Uh-oh, I refuse to
Because
answer.
this is kind of,
This is a follow-up to what.
Okay.
oh, what,
Well, it says, my long-term tenant has legally threatened me and has legally threatened my new tenants who live above them due to walking around the apartment, I guess it's loud walking around. And in other words, Frank, to your point, they're saying, hey, look, my neighbors are committing a nuisance, you better do something about it like a victim or I'm going after you.
right, but again, to evict them,
I agree with you.
yeah, I mean, we've tried nuisance cases.
They're very tough.
Well, we'll do it if there's more than one occupant and there's some proof, you know? I mean, if there's multiple units in the building complaining about one unit, I think there's some substance there that you can go on. And if they have like photos of, hoarding, fire damage, I mean, we had one tenant who kept smoking next to oxygen tanks that would be delivered to a neighbor. I mean, things like that.
You can't make this up.
Yeah, I mean, you could serve a 10-day notice to cure on something like that, but.
Before we forget about that topic, let's remind the membership, SFAA actually is involved in litigation as a plaintiff against the city on the 10-day notice, but
Right.
where do things currently stand with Judge Haynes and the real
My
property board?
understanding is we still need to do the 10-day notice, it's city requirement.
Right.
now.
Well, except for the non-payment, there's some questions.
Oh, no, the 10-day is for the nuisance to
Right.
cure.
Yeah, exactly.
For sure, we have to use the city
Yes.
form,
Yeah.
and there is a form,
Rent board website.
yes,
Right.
that you have to use for that.
Right.
Before you could do a cure and quit notice.
But now he wants to see the 10-day followed by the cure or quit or the quit.
The only one that I filed on something like that, I did include both the 10 and the 3
Right.
and the proof of services. I mean, just to be safe.
I know one of our colleagues had some problems with that. Go ahead, what's the next, you were gonna ask me something.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
not gonna answer it.
Oh,
but
yeah,
you can ask me anything.
well, I mean, this is kind of an area that there's arguments both sides, but does an adult child inherit the tenancy if they were not born when the tenancy was initiated?
Well, we've had some tough cases on that recently. We go back to the Mosser and Galopoulos case, which stands, 2 Court of Appeal published decisions from this district that says, hey, look, if the child moved into the unit, the inception of the tenancy, they could have been, one case they were 7, the other case they were 11, and the parents leave, the law is, at least the Court of Appeal, and that is law now, it's clear that the children that are now adults stand to inherit. In recent cases at the rent board, it's gone a little bit farther than that. And in fact, in one case, it did go up to appeal and was affirmed by the District Court of Appeal. you had a situation where the child was there, divorced parents, whatever, the child spent some time in the rental unit, and then moved all over the country, moved to Minnesota, moved to Santa Rosa, moved all over, led his life, got married, had kids, whatnot. Gets a call from dad, says, look, I'm not doing so well, I'm getting old, I'm gonna move out, so you better, you and your family, best move back here because the rent's a super discount, you know, $600 a month or something. And so they moved back, and of course dad moved out or passed away, I don't remember the exact situation, but the then owner of the building said, wait a minute, I'm gonna adjust rent under Costa-Hawkins to market, and the rent board said, not so fast. And that decision was affirmed both by Judge Haynes and, thankfully, in an unpublished decision from the Court of Appeal.
Right, and I don't agree with that, because if they're living somewhere else as their primary residence, I should terminate the tenancy.
I would have agreed, yes, I agree with you in principle, but that's not, and then we've had several other decisions since then go the same way. So that seems to be the trend now where, you know, and then going to this question, if you were a child not yet alive, but were born into the rental unit, I would say probably at this particular stage in our history, you're gonna face some resistance that might be successful. And that brings me up to my, I always have to interject politics here, which is we probably have another challenge to Costa-Hawkins, not this election cycle in November, but the following November of 24. Our friend in LA is running again with the, this time it's just a straight out repeal. And he'll let local jurisdictions decide what they want to do, but we know exactly what will happen here. It'll follow the unit registry, right? They'll have the infrastructure in place. So if Costa-Hawkins were to be repealed in November of 2024, we'll have a vacancy control measure slapped on us here in San Francisco and Oakland and everywhere else. So really, we need to pay attention to that, and we'll be, of course, campaigning very hard, and we're going to need a lot of money to do that. I hate to say that right now, but that's the reality.
Yeah, before the last repeal attempt, I believe a lot of landlords were trying to raise it up to market just to be safe at the time.
Right.
They were afraid they couldn't raise it again.
Well, now with unit registry, they're going to have the database all set, ready to go. So strange, tough times, but we got to beat it. We got to embrace it. We can't run from it. Otherwise, it won't be good. Go ahead.
Oh, I think we're out of questions. You want me to look at the list?
Oh no, I got it. I love it.
I think there was a security.
You read my mind. I was going to ask this. Given the increase in property crimes, that's indisputable, right? It's going on like crazy. The question is, I'd like to install cameras on my property. Are there legal requirements or obligations for installing security cameras in the common areas? What do you say?
Well, our recommendation is that for common areas, it's permitted because there's no right of privacy in the common areas. But you can't like aim it at the tenant's store, for example, to see who's going in and out or anything that might, violate their right of privacy, such as having part of their window exposed to the camera. But if the common area entrance or the hallways are generally permitted.
Video only, no audio in California.
Yeah, that's correct.
You gotta be careful. Some states you can, but not here.
Yeah, California, no audio recordings without permission of the person
Right.
being recorded. And that's everywhere. It doesn't matter if it's a camera or a phone or muted mic.
I have a question for you. This is a good one too, following on Costa-Hawkins. But what's your sort of recommended practice when somebody comes to you and says, hey, look, I think my tenant has moved out of the area and I'd like to adjust rent to market. What do you do in that instance?
Okay, is there someone still in the unit?
Well, that's the first question, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, if there's someone in the unit that's subleasing from him and he has another primary residence, we can do a Costa-Hawkins rent increase based on the fact that he's no longer residing in the unit. Now, if it's vacant, the question then is, why is he not there? I mean, for example, he could be in the military.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons, or he could be going to school somewhere out of state and he's gonna return. If the intent is to return there and the absence is temporary, he can argue that he still has the right to stay there and no Costa-Hawkins.
Right. Frank, this is a question that comes up. You and I are members of an attorney group that we meet every first Wednesday of the month.
Right.
This is a question that has come up, I don't know, 20 times.
Okay.
And that is, well, the question is I have bank rent increases that's more than 10%. But the overall question is can we increase rent right now beyond 10%, or are we still subject to the various states of emergencies? I know there's vigorous debate in our group about this.
I don't believe the 10% is in place now.
You and I agree.
The moratorium's over,
Yeah.
so there's no 10%. I think 10%.
Well, they're always advertising some emergency. The drought, then now it's the floods, and then the snow,
Right,
and then
right.
it's always something.
Well, if there's a state of emergency in your area that's
Right.
been put in place by the state of California, there is a temporary stop on rent increases.
So I think we both agree, you can now do the 10. Remember, you have to do a 90-day notice if it's over 10%.
Right, unless you're like in a county that's flooded and there's a federal
Right.
emergency or something
I
like
don't think
that.
we've flooded here yet.
No,
That'll
we're
come
fine,
on.
we're fine.
All right. I think I've covered all of them. Are there any follow-ups from the group? We're getting towards the half hour. Yes, sir.
Did you address whether the 10% limit applies to a vacancy, like between tenants?
Well, because we're not in a state of emergency anymore, we think that there is no vacancy control right now.
And
So-
what if there is a state of emergency? Are we paying any attention to that?
Well, we do, absolutely. But for example, during the height of COVID, when there was local, state, and federal states of emergencies in place, I think many in our group believe that you ran a risk, at least, of taking a vacant rental unit or somebody that voluntarily moved out at a very low rent and then reoffering it at a rent that was well over 10% of what the previous tenant was paying. I didn't see anybody suffer adverse consequences for doing so, knock on wood, but that was certainly something that was discussed. And I will say this, I think hopefully there is no next time, but the next time there is some major state of emergency like COVID, I think that's an issue that the SFAA is going to have to address in its publications and its email blasts to the members. Because you're right, that was something that we talked about. Yes.
Regarding, I had a question on subtenants and information on subtenants.
Oh, that's right. That was a good question. Why don't you re-ask it?
So my question is, if I have a tenant, master tenant, who rotates subtenants through continuously, I never even know who's living there. I know within my lease it says that I'm supposed to approve it. I also know that's not enforceable. But I would like to know who's living in the building, at least their name and their phone number. How do I go about that? Am I allowed to do that?
Right?
Yeah, I believe you can ask your master tenant for the information. Are they refusing to provide it? Is that the issue?
Yeah, they're not interested.
The question is this, let me repeat it, that's a good question, is can we compel our primary tenant to disclose the information about their subtenants? As you know, we have extremely permissive subletting laws, and that was capped off in 2015 with the Kim legislation, which basically says we don't care what your lease says, it's 2 persons per habitable room. And that has resulted in, coupled with the other 2 laws on the book, with a lot of subletting going on and roommate swapping. And the question is do I have a right to know who's in my building or in my rental unit?
Well, according to the lease, you do have a right, but how are you gonna compel that?
That's-
You see, in San Francisco, you're not gonna really be able to go to court and enforce that.
No way, not a chance.
So I can ask,
Yeah,
that's it.
sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
I've read one of the city supervisor has offered 2 months for extension the moratorium.
Yes, we talked about that. The Dean Preston, yes, he extended it. I'm sure it'll pass. It'll extend for 2 months after the state of emergency is dropped here for COVID. And but as Frank and I noted, it's not a moratorium. The press is mischaracterizing it. What it is it's an affirmative defense where if you sue a tenant in eviction court, in our housing court, for non-payment of rent, the tenant can run to court with, declaration or evidence to say, the reason I can't pay rent in April of 2023 is because of COVID. And I kind of joke around with my tenant attorney friends and say, with an unemployment rate of, the national rate is 3.4%, but it's less here in San Francisco. That's a hard argument to make right now. It was an easy argument to make 2 years ago, or even a year ago, but it's a very hard argument to make today.
Can I increase the rent?
Yes. By law,
Yes,
you can.
according to the red
Yeah,
board
yeah.
table.
That was,
right?
that, by the way, that prohibition went away in October of 2020. I believe it was very temporary. It was March 2020 through October, mid-October of 2020, the peskin freeze on rent increases. So yes, you can.
Thank you.
It's very confusing because every county has their own
Right.
rules, you know, it's like, there's no uniformity to it. But San Francisco specific, because that's where we're at right now, here,
Okay,
that's the rule. So.
thank you.
I think we have time for 2 more questions. Anybody? Maybe not. Come on.
No,
Yes,
sure.
please.
I have 2 apartments that they had low rent, they moved their girlfriends in, one bought a place, one went someplace else. I have to do all kinds of work in the place, and we haven't had the cash flow, so, and I waited for the 10% to pass, because you're talking about 1 bedrooms for $1,800 and $2,100, Golden Gate Bridge View fireplace for the higher price, so I have to go higher than 10%. So I'm free to go ahead and fix those up and put them out there.
Yes.
And I'm not gonna go crazy, but I can't do 10%, that's
No,
too
you're
low.
free to charge market, and you're at the right meeting because they're gonna go over market it.
It's vacant, right?
Vacant, it's been vacant for over a year,
You
unfortunately.
charge whatever you want as far as market's concerned.
Thank you.
One more question? Oh, wow. I think we're, well, yes, good.
So what are the rules behind renting out non-recognized units? So if it's a
Ah,
duplex-
good question. Illegal units.
Yeah.
You go ahead.
Well, it's a gamble right now if you rent out a.
Very good question.
I mean, if you have a problem with that unit, they're gonna bring up the fact that it's not legal. They're gonna say, we're gonna stop paying rent because it's illegal to collect on a, on a unit that's not been legalized by the city. If for example, the city comes in and cites you for the illegal unit and says you have to remove it, you're gonna end up with damages that you owe the tenant.
Yeah.
Because they're gonna claim, well, we thought it was legal and we have rent control, protection, so if I get moved out, you're gonna have to pay my increased rent for X number of years because of this. I mean,
Very expensive lawsuits.
yeah, I mean, lately, a lot of landlords are not renting out their illegal units once they become vacant. They're-
I highly advise not doing it. You have, your remedy is to legalize it, and the city's been a lot more accommodating in recent years for unit legalization for obvious reasons. It's part of their ADU push as well, but, don't do it. Don't do it. Unless you have a CFCO for it, don't do it. On that happy cheery note, we're gonna end, but it's good to see you all again after 3 years. And, we'll see you at the next live event. So thank you for your support.
All right, I'd like to introduce our associate sponsor for tonight, Miracle Method.
Hello, my name is Jaime. I'm with Miracle Method of San Francisco. We're a refinishing company, locally owned and operated. We refinish bathtubs, restore tile, countertops, formica, upholstery marble, the fiberglass one pieces. We come in, we do a whole preparation. It's a step-by-step service that we do. We come in, we prepare the surfaces by 2-step deep cleaning them first, defilming the surface, make sure that our product will adhere properly. We then repair any visible damages, chips, nicks, cracks, things of that nature. If you do have tile, we do grout the tile in. We don't remove old grout, but we do grout the tile in to ensure the tile looks nice and full with grout before we seal it. Once those things are done, the repair is done, we mask off any surrounding areas, and then we begin to apply our coatings to your surface. Our coatings is a 3-part coating system. We have a bonding agent, we have an epoxy primer that's applied, and it's finished off with an acrylic finish. All these products kind of bond together as one, and on any given surface, we give it about 6 to 7 coats of material, which in turn dries in about a 24-hour period. So for instance, a bathtub for our technicians takes about a good half a day or so to complete on average, depending on size and conditions of the bathtub. If it is occupied, there's tenants or somebody lives in the home, they may use the bathtub prior to our arrival, whether it's a bathtub or a shower, what have you. They may use it prior to our arrival. We come in, we start the job. If it's just a bathtub, about a half a day, like I said, the technician takes off about say 12, 1 o'clock that day, 12, 1 o'clock the next day, the tenant could be back into their shower. For emergency uses, we do have a 4-hour cure time, which, sometimes we get in situations where the tenant can't find another place to shower or they have a certain schedule, so we can accommodate that as well. All of our products are solely manufactured for Miracle Method, especially our bonding agent. That's something that's not on the market that no other refinisher can find or get their hands on. We've been in business for over 40 years, Miracle Method has. We are part of a franchise, but we are individually owned and operated. So we're a small office, we're locally operated, we're locally owned. We service San Francisco, all of San Francisco, and we'll go up to the San Mateo Bridge on the peninsula. So we are a good option for folks that are having trouble renting, or you have an old bathroom with a bunch of pink towel in it, and you might be having trouble with people coming through saying, oh, I don't know, it looks dated. We can refresh that up, make it look all nice and white and clean. Nobody ever know that it's been refinished. Our services come with a 5-year warranty against failure of adhesion, meaning our products are not gonna fail for no apparent reason, so we cover that. Usually that's residential. Commercial properties, it's usually a 1-year warranty, but again, we've been around for so long, we work with our customers. We work with a lot of property managers, we work with a lot of realtors. So we're really good at what we do. We have trained technicians that are constantly training, which actually next week we're going to a training in Sacramento. Miracle Method is constantly bettering their products, offering better coating systems, things of that nature. So we've been around a long time, and we're here to serve you guys when you're ready for us.
You mentioned you refinish the culture marble in
Yes.
Korean.
Corian, cultured marble, formica, tile, metal over porcelain, cast iron, porcelain
So
over
you
metal,
put
sorry.
the cover on it, right? It's
We
like
don't
an
put a
older
cover.
unit, you put a cover on the culture marble.
It's applied by with a fine sprayer. These are coatings that we apply. We
Okay.
apply a 3-part coating system.
So it looks like a paint, or it looks like a...
It looks like a nice refinished, brand new bathtub.
No, not bathtub.
No matter what it is, even in like the fiberglass one pieces, they kind of look a little dated now because most of them are like a creamy color.
Yeah.
We freshen those up and make them look nice and bright and white, so it brightens up everything, kind of makes things look a little bigger, things like that. Easier to clean. Now, when we refinish something, it makes it a lot easier to maintain and clean. The grout lines are sealed, so you don't get those little holes in the grout lines where water gets in behind the tile and then you have tile falling off the walls. So that's why we grout things in and then we seal over the tile and grout, so it makes it all one piece basically. Kind of like waterproofing it in a way. Yeah.
Well, I talked to you outside. We're using you right now. We've used you over the last few years.
Thank
This
you.
is the 3rd time we're resurfacing the tub in this house in Bernal Heights. And
Right.
tenants are happy to have it done, and you've done a great job over the years.
Thank you so much, we appreciate that. Anybody else?
What is the cost?
Average price for a bathtub right now, say for a 5-foot bathtub, no shower doors, that has not been refinished previously, meaning somebody didn't already apply a coating on there, it's starting at about $700 and up. So a lot of times we price things based on size and condition and what it's gonna take for us to complete the job. So just depending on that, we usually will ask for pictures first, and then a lot of times we'll also do on-site estimates, depending on the situation.
After you finish the coating, you're not supposed to put the shampoo bottle on the tub?
Correct, just like any other, say, metal. So, I think most people have seen old bathtubs where you see rust marks on the corners or even on the bottom. A lot of times what that is people leaving soap bottles on the corners of these bathtubs. Over time, the water that gets trapped underneath that soap bottle over time will start to deteriorate the surface. Whether it's porcelain or our coatings, it'll start to deteriorate that surface. So we always recommend getting a shower caddy or something of that sort. Bath mats is the same thing. When folks use a bath mat on the bottom of a bathtub, it begins to deteriorate the bathtub itself. And we repair those types of things all the time. And what we also offer is a slip-resistant surface, where we incorporate the slip-resistant surface into our coatings to make it an anti-slip for folks to step in and out. We box it out just like a bath mat would be, and we kind of leave the back behind in case anybody wants to ever sit down and have a bath. it's not too rough on their bottom. It's not a really rough surface. I do have a sample outside. It feels more like a boat deck, you know, what you feel on a boat deck so you don't slip. Kind of the same feeling is what we apply onto bathtubs. If anybody has any inquiries or any more questions, we do have a booth back there. We have a couple little freebies, pans, hats, things of that nature. Feel free to come by, ask questions, and we're here to serve. And we thank you guys.
All right, I'm going to invite our next panel up. We're going to start talking about market conditions. So, Chris.
Good afternoon, I'm Chris Bricker. I'm a board member of San Francisco Apartment Association. And I'd like to welcome our panelists as they settle in. We have a diverse group today, so we'll get a broad cross-section of answers for our questions today. Welcome everyone. We're going to give each one of our panelists a couple minutes to introduce themselves. So today I'd like to welcome Selma Bushell from the AMSI, Joanne Fazzino from J. Wavero Associates, Nigel Hughes from CoStar, Solomon Saria from Sutro Property Management, and Stephanie Yurkinen from the Fillmore Center. Go ahead.
Great. Well, thanks for having me here. It's a big honor. I started my real estate career in Manhattan working investment banks. What I was doing there was working with distressed properties, so I saw the ups and lows of the industry. But ironically, what I spent a lot of time with was hiring leasing agents to enhance the occupancy of these properties and obviously increasing profitability and eventually selling these commercial properties or multifamily. So that was really, that was a fun kind of entry into real estate. In 2007, I joined AMSI. One of the primary reasons I joined AMSI was Rob Fleischer, who was an amazing person and also very knowledgeable, plus the staff was very, very supportive. And secondly, I realized their core business is leasing. And I thought to myself, when I got my license, a lot of real estate agents immediately go into sales. And I thought, well, you know, there's not a lot of agents doing leasing. This is my chance to develop a little specialty niche, which has been fantastic because, leasing is very different than sales, which when I realized when I started working, because you're maintaining and developing a relationship. And that's the key to my success. I mean, I've been working with landlords for several years, leasing multiple properties, same properties, and some of these properties have been in families for generations, so the relationships gets personal, and developing a strong bond is very, very important with the landlord. So it's not a sale, you sell and you're done. It's a relationship. To give you an idea about my experience in San Francisco, on average, I close over 70 leases a year. So I'm well versed with every neighborhood in San Francisco, marketing additions. I do condos, multifamilies, single family homes. So I understand the marketing additions, how to analyze markets when I'm hired to get by a landlord. And Marie asked me, one of the questions was top level, the past 3 months, what I've been seeing. There are neighborhoods we have more supply than demand. They're tilting more towards supply. But what I see when I work with landlords, if you have quality properties that are priced right, they will lease. To give you an example, there's a property I'm putting on that I'm actually going to be putting on for more money than I got 2 years ago, which is great. So it's a quality property, well maintained, we're pricing it correctly, but I'm going to be getting more. So I guess the takeaway from this is real estate's a localized business, and it's neighborhood by neighborhood, but pricing right and quality, keeping your property up is very important. And that's it. Okay.
Oh, okay. Hi. We'll just stay here. Hi, it's great to see everybody. It's been 3 years, just about. I'm Joanne Fazzino with J. Wago Associates. I'm a broker associate. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I love what I do. Well, there's some days, you know. But for the most part, it's a great business. I personally work on the owner side of the business, which means I work with the owners of the properties. I help them price them and put them on the market. In J. Wago Associates, we have about 15 agents, and everybody does leasing. The owners of the company do some property management. We have some properties that we work in on the peninsula and in Marin, but for the most part, we work almost exclusively in San Francisco. So on the tenant side of the business, you know, it used to be really popular before COVID, relocation tours and all of that, but that died during COVID. But now tenants and roommates are starting to come back into the market, and relocation tours are starting to come back. So of course, we do have agents in our company who work on the tenant side of the business as well as the landlord side of the business. So we do relocation tours as well. So for the most part, you know, it's been getting busier, I must say. There's more inquiries coming in. I think that's also part of the time of the year, but also just because there's people that are being hired, they're coming back to the office more. So it was that everybody worked from home, and now they're starting to come back to the office 2 days a week, 3 days a week, and sometimes full time. So I've been very busy lately, not only bringing in properties, evaluating properties for a rental price, and helping owners to decide what to do to help them improve the property, and what amenities really people are looking for. And of course, we're going to get into that later with all the questions. But I love what I do. It's interesting. Every day is different, and the market is improving, and I think we have some good times coming up in the future.
Hi, I'm Nigel Hughes. I'm the Director of Market Analytics for the Bay Area with CoStar. If you don't know CoStar, you probably do know Apartments.com, which is one of our companies. About 26 million renters and potential renters go on Apartments.com every month looking for somewhere to move to. My background is in commercial real estate mostly. Started out in the United Kingdom, worked in Australia for a while, but I've been in the Bay Area here for the last 16 or 17 years. I've worked with apartment developers, investors, owners, on both the investment side and the asset management side and property management side. So what we're seeing in the apartment market here in San Francisco in the last 3 months is really an uptick in rents. You know, this time last year, of course, rents were really booming. There was strong rent growth of upwards of 10% a year that was taking place. But as soon as the Fed started raising interest rates, then that all changed, and absorption of units slowed right down, and then apartment rents started declining. So they've been going down for the last part of 2022, but over the last few months, it seems to have bottomed out, and in the last month or 2 months, rents have actually started to uptick again. So that's a good sign that there's some positive growth coming back into the market. Vacancy-wise, we're still not quite back to where the market was pre-pandemic. Vacancy rate then, on average, was about 5 to 6% across the market. Shot up to 10 or 11% during the pandemic. And it's come down, and for the last year or two now, it's been about 7 to 8%, kind of bouncing around at that level in San Francisco. That seems to be the pattern that it's set in at the moment. So we'll see where it goes in the future. So that's my top level overview.
Hello, hi. I am Selma Bushell from Sutro Property Management. We're a boutique real estate property management firm that pride ourselves working with a lot of mom and pops, family trusts, some trustees. We pride ourselves in being able to work with the clients in sometimes transferring the management from the patriarch or matriarch who built the portfolio on over to the children who are now going to be kind of the ones making the key decisions on it. Sometimes those children are in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, or even 70s. That's who our normal clientele is, so long family-held properties. I'm the president and broker of record of Sutro, and what we're seeing in the market, very simple. With the management side, organization and communication is still key. You know, most tenants can deal with any sort of heater broken or plumbing broken or anything that goes on as long as you keep them in the loop of what's going on. Most people have a tolerance to be kind and be helpful if you give them the opportunity. There's always, you know, the trouble tenant out there we've all dealt with in this room, but for the most part, people will work with you. What we're seeing in the market is, you know, pretty good news. A lot of the bigger units are now starting to get rented. Last summer, I'd say, I don't know, I guess a summer and a half ago, middle of 2021, a lot of our larger 3 and 4 bedroom units were taken off the market. I think we had 2 years of college graduates, 2020 and 2021, take those larger units off because they're itching to get out of their parents' homes. So that was nice. And more or less, we're seeing more or less a stabilized market. Anything north of California is doing really well across the city. Other parts of the market are doing well as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Urkanen. I'm the general manager at the Fillmore Center and work under Greystar. So a little bit different representation on my end. My community is 1,114 units. It's 10 buildings, 3.5 city blocks, and retail space on top of that. So speaking within that and you know, my industry experience, I've been in this market for about 5 years now, but 18 years of experience in property management. And certainly, we've all seen a lot of change over the last few years with the pandemic. But I think also, you know, we saw recovery coming. In the prior year, in 2021, certainly I saw rents go back up. And as Nigel mentioned, we did see them drop a bit, which is typical for seasonality. We always expect around the holiday period that you're gonna see those rents drop a bit. And normally, under standard conditions, we do start to see them start coming back up around tax season. Yes, there's still a little hesitation in the market because of interest rates and people are watching that, we've seen that, but there still are renters out there. What we're noticing, at least on my side of things, is that people are making decisions and they're planning a bit further out. So where maybe during the pandemic, we saw a lot of shifts with people who were ready to make moves because concessions were hot and rents were really reduced and they were willing to make quick moves, they're looking at least 30, 60, and maybe even 90 days out. So it's important, like they've all said, is monitoring your market and monitoring your rents and making sure those are effective and that your product is commensurate with that. But those rentals are coming. I can tell you, again, keep in mind my building size, but I had a week of about 23 rentals just a few weeks ago. So they're definitely out there.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's start off with questions, and feel free to just jump right in, raise your hand, and start answering the question. We'll give each of you a chance if you have something to add, and you're welcome to add to the answer. The first one is, in what neighborhoods have you seen the largest increase in prices as compared to before the pandemic? And where have you seen rents decrease the most?
Yeah, the largest increase I've seen is north side of the city. Pretty much Pack Heights, Cow Hollow, Russian Hill, Marina, areas North Beach. I've seen the most increase. Like I said, I'm actually putting units on the market at a higher price, and they are renting compared to COVID times. Where I see a little bit of not a big decline. I feel like we hit bottom and rates are going to start to go up. Is more kind of south of market, where you have more supply, less tech activity. But I mean, in terms of like supply, I mean, there is more supply south of market, but I feel like during COVID, a lot of people did move out. I know everybody hears about tech layoffs, but I feel like the COVID was more, you know, hit the city hard in terms of everybody moving out. Now people are kind of coming back, so that'll somewhat, and you know, those areas will start to come back south of market.
What's the price range?
What's that?
What's the price range?
For which area?
For 1 bedroom. You mentioned north.
Like, so north, I mean, for 1 bedroom, if it's anywhere from, you know, low 3s up to 4, depending on if you have a washer and dryer, you know, parking will have an extra $350 a month. Parking's a big commodity, especially in Russian Hill, North Beach. It's hard to find parking, so you can tack on an extra $350 a month.
In the 2 bedroom?
Anyone else?
2 bedrooms, I guess.
We're gonna, we may take some questions at the end, but hopefully we're gonna answer a lot of these questions. We have a lot of them here. I just wanna make sure we get to all of them.
I'd also like to add that some of the high rises in South Beach, not necessarily Solo, but South Beach get a really high price. I've rented a few of the 2-bedroom, 2 baths, large ones, and they're went for $6,800, $7,000 a month. So there's that happening also. So luxury units with a lot of amenities, they will get high price also. And the lowest prices, I would say, is probably Soma, that mid-range, mid-market area. It's tough. There's a lot of competition. There's hundreds of units down there. So they have a hard time getting a higher price, but they also might have to add 1 month free. I'm still seeing move-in concessions.
I just want to say one thing. I know pre-pandemic, post-pandemic pricing is important. One thing I'd like us to all remember, I remember one of my buildings in Alamo Square, for the 1 bedroom was $950 or $1,000 a month in 09. It rocketed up to $2,800 in 2016, 2017, 2018. And then it plummeted down post-COVID. We're still well above that. That unit's still $2,400 right now. So yes, there's the pre-pandemic and the post-pandemic pricing, but if you just think of how quickly a lot of our unit prices went up from 09, 2010, all the way till 2018, it's kind of unfair to just look at the pre-pandemic pricing versus post-pandemic, because we had a really huge, percentage gain there for 7 years.
Right. Yeah, we were definitely in a bubble, which I think many people talked about the fact that we were in a bubble and they were really waiting for that to change. So there has been a reset. We reset our rents, but certainly we've projected growth, and we're going to talk about that a bit too. So I think the message is don't panic. There is rent regrowth. We've already seen some of that. And as in anything, seasonality, you're going to see an ebb and flow. You're going to see those shifts. It's not going to just be a steady incline.
Yeah, what we've actually seen is strongest growth since the pandemic in the marina, which ties into what you were saying, Selma. And also downtown San Francisco is actually one of the strongest growth markets since the pandemic, which is interesting because just looking over the last year, downtown is the lowest growth market in San Francisco. So some sort of recent change has happened there where people are, and we see this in a lot of markets, that people are kind of moving out of downtown a little more. They're kind of preferring other locations. So we're seeing lower rent growth, higher vacancy, and even a lot less construction in downtown markets. In terms of the lowest rent growth, South of Market, Civic Center, Tenderloin, the main areas. And also some of the luxury properties in like the Heights and Castro have actually seen some of the lowest growth as well since before the pandemic.
Okay. What types of apartments do you see getting leased up the quickest? And you can answer that from a size perspective, or I suppose a luxury perspective with washer, dryers, amenities, things like that. But which ones are the highest in demand?
The units that check all the boxes: laundry unit, dishwasher, parking. Yeah.
Can I also add outdoor space? I noticed that's a big thing. Everybody wants outdoor space, I noticed.
What about larger apartments for working from home? Is that?
Yes, definitely.
Outdoors, yeah, like a
Even
backyard.
couples are looking for 3 bedrooms, or the 2 plus a big dining room, if they both work from home.
What sort of incentives, if any, are you seeing, or in any of your situation? Are you offering concessions or anything?
I'm not personally offering concessions, so we had during the pandemic, certainly that was a huge demand across the market. Are we still seeing it out there? Absolutely. I have comps within my market that are still offering anywhere from half a month up to 2 months free. But again, we use the market surveys, we use those tools available to us and really look at where our rents are compared to that. Concessions are tough to recover from. We're still having those post-concessionary conversations with tenants who are up for renewal, and they're coming back and expecting that again. So if there are opportunities to do other incentives or to make your rents priced competitively without doing that, it's always been my experience that that's better in the long run for keeping tenancy in there, as opposed to what we've seen is people trying to still shop for those things in the market and being willing to move.
Can I ask a follow-up legal question on that? When you offer a 2-month concession, aren't you changing the rent going forward?
You might be speaking about rent control. and I'm not in a rent control buildings are a bit different. So in a non-rent
Oh.
control, then no.
Okay.
If you're offering.
I am
that in a
talking about rent
building,
control.
It is different.
Okay.
There's certain parameters with that.
Okay.
Well, I think what you're saying is that if you give someone 2 months free in that initial year,
Mhm.
when you go to raise the rent, you have to take that into consideration, raise the rent on the discounted rent. And you have to talk to an attorney about that.
Well,
We're not lawyers, but that's
I
what
am.
I've been told by our
Okay.
attorney.
All right. Okay.
We touched on them, anyone else?
I was just going to say there certainly was an uptick in the number of properties offering concessions in the latter half of last year. Again, with a bit more weakness in the market, certainly landlords seem to be offering more concessions than they were previously. And particularly in places like downtown Oakland, where there was a flood of new deliveries, and landlords were certainly having to offer concessions there to try and get a share of that business.
I'd also like to say that sometimes if a client that I'm working with wants to start higher than the market, we start at that price, because you never know what's gonna happen. You may get some inquiries, you may not. But if we don't get inquiries, then sometimes I suggest, let's offer 1 month free and lower it just a little bit, rather than jump down $100, $200, maybe just lower it $50, but offer some kind of move-in concession. Sometimes I just put in the words, move-in special. And then they ask me, well, what kind of move-in special? I said, well, it depends on the strength of the application, which means like sometimes it could be just $500 off the first month or something like that. So offering, being flexible on what kind of move-in concessions can help to get an owner a little bit higher price.
Be careful with that a little bit too, and check with your attorney, because there could be
Right,
some fair
yeah.
housing issues with that, but, a little flexibility doesn't hurt. We talked a little bit about amenities, just briefly, you were mentioning washers and dryers and things. But I'm curious, what are tenants willing to settle for versus what are deal breakers? What are they telling you they have to have?
I had one unit on Franklin that did not have outdoor space, but was gorgeous. That was a big deal. Everybody wanted outdoor space. So I feel outdoor space, washer and dryer. Parking is also important. I mean, it's more important in some place like Rushmore or North Beach where parking is limited. But definitely outdoor space, washer and dryer. Kitchen, as long as it's a nice layout, everything looks clean, that's okay.
Okay.
Well, there's a lot of rent control properties they're not really set up to have washer dryer in the unit, but at least if it's in the building. I really, personally, I don't even want to work on buildings that don't have washer dryer in the building because they're so hard to rent. Or you have to lower the price so much to make it attractive to people. They'll rent it for the price and they're okay with going to a laundromat.
I'll speak on the same. So we have a mixture at my property of some buildings that have in-unit washer dryers in the units, and then also some buildings that have laundry rooms. And a washer dryer is certainly, it became a much bigger focal point during the pandemic with people wanting to be less in shared spaces. And so we do see that there's a longer lag time perhaps on renting units that don't have an in-unit washer dryer, as opposed to those that do. That is one thing. It's something that we're continuously trying to evaluate is are there other opportunities to even though it's not maybe ideal to have a combo washer dryer, but it's still an attraction point for a resident, right? So those are opportunities to look into if there's maybe workarounds with that. And then parking. I also saw a huge desirability for parking spaces. Again, during the pandemic, it was interesting, we saw a lot more cars, and parking income really went up during that time. I'm still seeing it be very high. I'm just seeing a shift in that as people are going back to the public transportation. A lot of people were very hesitant with that during the pandemic, and so we didn't have a lot of people investing in cars. And the other thing I think we're seeing with that too is more electric cars. So those are also things to think of. It's a big thing, and I'm not sure where they're at right now with bringing back incentives for that, but we are seeing people wanting availability for charging. And keep in mind, if you have electric and it's able to sustain it, you have the ability to look at increasing pricing for that to offset that electric usage. So.
Well, what I do find is in some of the older buildings I represent in Lower Pack Heights, they don't have the ability to add a charger. So that kind of, it is what it is. I mean, I tell them to go over to Whole Foods over in Franklin, but that's sometimes people don't like.
The same for us, the same, yeah.
Back to the washers and dryers, because I think parking, either you have it or you don't have it kind of in your building, and it's tough to add space, but, and any expenses to add a washer and dryer, but what type of premiums do you think you're getting for one bedroom, the same, apples to apples, but with a washer dryer?
I can speak to this because we have a building that as units turn, we can get a washer dryer in like the little back of the kitchen. And usually it costs us anywhere in the range of, you know, appliances and everything included, you know, $5,000 to $9,000 depending on, you know, all in. And we're getting at least $150 to $250 per month premium. And there's a laundromat across the street from this property and it's still doing that well. So when you do the ROI on it, it pays for itself in 3 years. I mean, that's a 33% cash on cash return. That's a no-brainer. You do it all day, every day.
Are owners who aren't renovating or upgrading their units upon turnover running into more difficulty in getting their apartments rented quickly? Seems like an obvious.
Yeah, that's an obvious, yeah, you don't want any, you know, anything you can do cosmetically, you don't want any defects when people walk in. I mean, it looks, painting is the best, you wanna paint.
And floors probably.
Floors, and people, in terms of floors, if people love hardwood floors, so you can avoid carpeting, anything, that those are biggies, flooring and,
Because if you price it too low, you're not gonna get the quality tenant that you're looking for.
Right.
Because, anyway.
Yeah, I would say on the flooring, that's a huge thing that we've also seen is a lot of people who do not want carpet.
Right.
They're really looking for flooring throughout, or at least flooring throughout the common areas. Certainly premiums on that too. And even if you are renting a vintage unit, right? Even if you have something that has vintage fixtures in there, doing something as simple as putting flooring in baseboards, upgrading your paint, maybe upgrading an appliance package, but having the rest of it be vintage still attracts that type of tenant, and it's still going to get you a bump in rent.
I suppose if you had to choose one, what would it be to upgrade?
probably, I would say, flooring is big.
Flooring, yeah, I was gonna say, even if it had carpeting, you would still.
Yeah, people feel, especially if it's older,
Okay.
yeah.
Can you talk about the impact of recent tech layoffs on the demand for apartments, overall citywide? That's a great answer for CoStar, but anyone take it.
Well, to be honest, I haven't seen anything yet. Nothing coming through in the numbers or the data that we track to show there's been any very recent uptick in vacancy in that regard. I guess it's really too far to tell, and it might kick in later if layoffs continue. But anecdotally we're hearing that a lot of people get laid off, find jobs pretty easily. And also a lot of people haven't actually been laid off yet. They've been announced, but they're still got
They're on vacation
before they're still before they're let go.
The package is expired, but they're still.
What we're seeing, you know, with layoffs at all large corporations, first in, or last in, first out. So the younger people who just got hired, they'd only been there a year or two, and the first ones fired. Those are usually the tenants that are in 3 and 4 bedroom roommate situations. Some of those units have become vacant recently. They take a little longer to rent. We're seeing that a little bit, but to agree with Nigel, we haven't seen too much of it.
Yeah, let me also add that these layoffs were global, so I feel like San Francisco was harder hit with COVID in terms of people moving out as opposed to the layoffs. So I feel like, you know, everybody says layoffs, but you know, you have people on the East Coast, internationally, so it's a global issue. So I feel like COVID's had more of an impact.
Yeah, I agree. I think media has certainly portrayed it as, because they're Bay Area based companies, but keep in mind, a lot of these employees have been working remote and may have already moved out of the area.
Right.
So what we're seeing is maybe they did lose their job because perhaps they couldn't return to the office and they weren't willing to relocate back from where they came from, but we've already experienced that loss here to begin with. I have over 2,000 residents, and I've had a handful, I can count on one hand the amount of people I've seen in the layoffs, and yet they're still finding other jobs. So also keep in mind, when they're announcing layoffs, oftentimes they're offsetting that with other positions at different pay ranges, and so people have opportunities with severance packages or to post for other positions too. So it does seem scary, it's certainly portrayed that way, but I don't think we've seen it quite be as bad as they're making it out to be.
How's crime or the perception of crime and safety impacting your housing markets? And if you can talk about neighborhood versus neighborhood, it may be helpful. But are people mentioning crime or asking about it when they?
Absolutely, yeah, definitely do, yeah. But as realtors, we can't really give any stats, right? So we have to be careful. But they definitely, I mean,
Yeah.
It is an issue.
20 minutes of words looking at the crime and safety data online that they have accessible, and then we can't make a decision for them.
Right.
If that's not the number one thing that people are looking for, maybe number 2 or number 3. So that's north of California, that's why.
You were just mentioning this earlier, but the data is showing, and you can verify some of this through CoStar, I don't know, through your data, that the population has decreased between 150,000 and 200,000 in the city.
Yeah, that's right. Big population drop during the pandemic, of course, people moving out of the city. But that population decline kind of started before the pandemic with the cost of living, right? Was a key driver. People moving away for affordability reasons. Companies are moving away. McKesson, Schwab, PG&E moved to Oakland. So, and people as well were moving away because it costs too much to live here. And it's been exacerbated during the pandemic. People using remote working as a reason or an excuse to find somewhere more affordable to live, because it can be. So we think it's slowing down now. We think it might actually have leveled out and the population might start rising again. Certainly employment's been rising pretty rapidly. And we're actually now back, I think, to more employment in San Francisco than there was in 2019. So we've finally gotten back to where we were before the pandemic. So that's a good sign.
That answered a good segue to the next question. Are you seeing more employers demanding a return to the office?
Excuse me, can you speak into the mic?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I apologize. The next question is, are you seeing employers demand a return to the office?
Yeah, definitely. I have a couple of clients that work at Apple, and they're required to go back to work 3 days a week. So that's, in other tech companies, so at least 3 to 2 days a week. So that's people are moving back into the city, which is good.
Yes, that's something that we talk about when we're taking an elevator ride up to the apartment to see it. It's like, oh yeah, I have to go back to work now 2 to 3 days a week. I didn't have to before. So I hear that from a lot of people now. And actually they're migrating toward downtown. So I have one building that I do a lot of rentals with on Mission between 7th and 8th. And it's a condominium building, very nice with amenities. But there's a lot of people moving into it now, even though the area isn't the greatest. They want to live in a nice building close to downtown. It's because they have to come back to the office.
I just was going to add on that. Definitely, yes, we're all seeing that. I think it's across the board in all markets that we're seeing this return in. But it's interesting because we had a lot of people who moved out of the market. They didn't necessarily move out of the state during the pandemic. They moved to South Bay. They moved to Sacramento. And we still have people coming in, and now what I'm starting to see is some of those people who are having to go back to working even hybrid are saying, okay, I don't want to do this commute because traffic's gotten bad again, and they're now starting to come back. So it is changing. It may not be full time like it was, and there's still some people who are making that decision to stay in a remote type of hybrid situation, but many are coming back in.
Are you seeing any difficulty renting out the higher end apartments, the higher priced apartments, I should say?
Yeah, I mean, anything, it's anything over 95 or 10,000. I mean, it takes longer. I mean, you do lease now, but it takes longer. You don't have as many people in that marketplace like you did before because the relocation market is down.
Okay. So what neighborhood would that $9,500 one be in? Or could it be in a lot of different neighborhoods?
Well, yeah, it could be district like, Cow Pack Heights, Snowy, so it's all, Russian Hill, but that takes a little bit longer to rent.
Okay.
I had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath condo in the marina that was renting for $9,500 a month, but during COVID, actually just after COVID, so in 2022, it rented for $7,850. Still not a bad price, I know, but a big difference. harder to rent at the pre-COVID price for the higher price units.
So it's taking you a month to rent them, 2 months
Well,
sometimes?
after the 850, it didn't take too long. So when the price is right, you will get more people. But 3 bedrooms are not as prevalent as, to get rented quickly, 3 bedroom and 4 bedroom as 1 and 2 bedrooms. For sure, there's more people in the 1 and 2 bedroom market than there are in the 3 and 4. So we don't have all those roommates coming back yet that were in the market before COVID. Because they would take up the 3 bedrooms and the 4 bedrooms.
What did that rent for in 2010, 2011?
I don't know if I was working with that owner at that time, it was a condo.
I'm just wondering that percentage-wise, how much that
Percentage-wise,
jumped.
that's probably a huge jump. Pre-COVID, we were like, it was an owner's market. It wasn't a tenant's market like it is now.
You just touched on the next question, the demand for the larger flats with respect to roommates. Do you see roommates coming back?
Yeah.
Yeah,
A little bit?
I would say that we definitely seen, I mean, I just was mentioning to them that, you know, we had, for quite a while, had some 2 bedrooms sitting. And again, this goes to the 3 bedroom conversation and seasonality and whatnot, but we are starting to see roommates come back into the market. A lot of time before, it used to be people who were maybe finding each other and deciding to make roommate decisions, and we had a lot of student roommates. I've seen a change where I haven't seen as many students coming back into the market yet, but they are there. Like, there are certainly students returning to school, and that is happening, but we are starting to see that change a bit for the 2s, and the 3s just take a little longer.
The 4 ones are very tough.
Right, those are tough.
One bathroom,
Yeah.
not
One
enough
bathroom,
before
yeah.
that. How are you managing your expectations for those of you who have owners involved? That their apartment should rent for a certain amount?
Well, what I do is when I meet with the landlord, I'll go through a quarter-mile radius analysis and, you know, this is what's on the market. And this is the range. And a lot of my landlords, let's say they want to start high, or at least they know what the competition is. I don't want to feel like I don't want them to feel like they're leaving money on the table. I said, look, let's try for about 10 days. And if we get no eyeballs on the property, then, you know, this is the range, this is the competition. But you have to really know your competition. Like I said earlier, you have to price it right for it to move. And again, this is also the year, actually maybe last year, the year of the low ball. And nobody wants to pay asking. I don't know what you guys found, but everybody feels like, okay, you know what, the economy's not great, and who knows, we got layoffs, so I can go in and offer less. That's,
Sure.
you know.
How is new construction in given neighborhoods versus your rent control product moving? Are you finding rent control product has more demand, less demand?
I think it's attractive, definitely. Some people are definitely looking for rent control. They almost always ask me, is this under rent control? So I think it is something that people are thinking about. You know, some people are definitely not going to just settle for rent control, but they definitely are looking, they hope to. They hope to find something that's under rent control.
If I can, I'll speak to that for just a second. I don't manage, as I mentioned before, a rent control building. But keep in mind, we all are under AB 1482.
Sure.
And so, depending on the age of the building, just as they're saying, well, rent control may have some parameters when it comes to lower percentages of increases they can get. And so they understand when they're making a decision for that initial rent, that rent growth year over year is going to be limited, right? Well, AB 1482 doing the same thing. These new buildings coming in, keep in mind, they are offering good deals up front, right? Lower rents or concessions, etc. But in a year, they have a lot more opportunity to increase those rents up higher than somebody who's controlled under rent control AB 1482. So I also think it's our responsibility to have those conversations with the prospect, with that applicant, and talk with them through those decisions, because they're making a decision based on here and now, but they're not the industry expert like you that's going to understand that and what that's going to look like for them in a year. Are we taking questions right now? I know there's somebody's up front.
I hesitate to open it with this large of a group to questions. So if you have one real quick, I'm flexible, so go ahead.
Yeah, my question is actually about utility costs. Do you, in your opinion, do you rather, in the market wise, is it better to say it's included in with rent, or be excluded, but then bump up the price in rent?
See, ours are not, so we do not have
Repeat
utilities
the question,
included
please.
in it, it's separated. So.
Talking about separating utilities or
Yeah.
including utilities and what's better. A lot of it depends on if it's, metered separately and,
Right.
rent control and how that impacts it too. Could be RUBS is another issue that could take a lot of our time to discuss and probably belongs in the legal section.
Question over here.
Go ahead.
What have you found to be most helpful in terms of where to advertise and promote your listings?
So I would say,
Where should you advertise was the question.
well, apartments.com, obviously, I have to say. No, but I'd say we get about 50% of our leads, maybe 55% of our leads from the Zillow network, so Zillow, Hot Pads, Trulia. We still get about 10 or 15% from Zumper. We still get about 20% from Craigslist. And then we, a lot of the other, apartments.com, there's all sorts of different syndication websites. But the biggest one is Zillow, the Zillow network, which is Zillow, Hot Pads, and Trulia. Zumper is very good, and Craigslist.
What's your strategy? You mentioned it briefly about how to price the apartment, but what are good resources? And I have to say CoStar is one of the best resources for all of the data that you're going to need to price your apartment because it breaks it down into the different neighborhoods, and it's a data mine that you can't really compete with. CoStar does a great job. Is there anything else, anyplace else that you guys would mention?
Again, I know that SFAA obviously has market surveys available for everybody. We use CoStar. That is a huge provider for us for data and information, especially navigating that with the client. Also, one of the things, the tools that we use for market surveys too is Radix. And Radix is also another comprehensive tool just to keep our finger on the pulse of general comps and
Could you spell
concessions
it,
that are
please?
out there. RADIX, Radix.
Thanks.
Are there particular demographics of tenants or prospective residents that certain areas you should cater or market to? Talking about demographics.
It sounds like they're
Well, it doesn't have to be fair housing. It could be tech workers versus attorneys or whatever. Are there any groups of people in certain neighborhoods, or are we so diverse in San Francisco that it really isn't something that you focus your advertising on?
We're really diverse, but we find it much more normal for any unit with 1.5 bath or 2 bath to be more couples than anything. Couples always want that extra half bath, so usually that's what it comes down to. But other than that, no.
Okay. One of the parts of the question was suggesting that if you're near UCSF or San Francisco State, students are a demographic that you're going to want to approach in your advertising, and perhaps demonstrating how easy it is for them to get their classes, blah, blah, blah.
It's really better that we don't say anything like that because it could look like discrimination.
Right.
It's possible.
So it's better for us not to mention certain groups that we're looking for in an ad.
But you could advertise, I know UCSF Hospital has a portal, so if you want to advertise in there, in case doctors are looking for.
Yeah, doctors,
But
nurses.
yeah, Joanne's correct, we don't want to advertise anybody specific because it's fair housing, could be, yeah. Excuse me? It's self-explanatory, you do UCSF housing, it will direct you there, you can post your property on there.
What are you doing to retain your tenants who are paying market rate or above market, perhaps?
Keep them happy. Yeah, you gotta keep them happy in this market, yeah, so.
Or if you raise the rent at all, raise it a little bit.
Right.
You don't want them to get scared and look around, start looking around.
So if they're over market or at market, you would still maybe send a small increase out to suggest that they're paying a fair rate, or?
It depends on the client, but that's what I would suggest.
Okay.
Because, and also I would do an analysis and look at how many other units are on the market that are less.
Right.
And you're so lucky to be getting what you're getting. You don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah.
So it's better to just keep a good tenant, do whatever you can to keep a good tenant, and not have the rent be the reason why they're gonna give their 30-day notice.
Here's an interesting one. Are owners who temporarily reduce their tenants' rent during the pandemic restoring their rents to previous or higher levels? Have you had that situation going?
I can speak a little to that. So we did do a reduction in rents. I think ours was reset in 2021 budget year. 2022, excuse me. We held in 2021 and continue to see our loss to lease not regrow as we had anticipated. So we did a reset in 2022. But again, using CoStar data, that really helps us in having those conversations. And so we anticipated 4% overall growth for the year. And of course, budgeted that in seasonally, looking at when those peak leasing seasons are. And we are seeing that. We are seeing some of that growth there in that market. Obviously, we just took a bump in March is our first spike on that. So, but it's not where it was. But we're definitely, the plan is to stagger it back up to that.
Okay. Have you seen owners become more flexible on things such as allowing pets if the market's?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that. Majority of tenants, especially in the north side of Meridian, Cal, everybody has a dog.
Yeah.
So it's crazy. So and it's all assisted, right? So but still, even if it's not, I mean, it's easy emotional support, assisted dog. But I've seen landlords be more lenient. And a lot of times I'll go look at their apartment they're living in now, and if it looks nice, so there's ways around to see if they are going to create damage with the pet.
What about pet rent?
Well, I guess you can collect up to 2 months max security, so I kind of lump that into pet rent because I feel like if you ask for pet rent, and if there is damage, there could be legalities like, you collected a month and a half, but an extra $500 for pets. So I just kind of lump it all in one, just say 2 months deposit.
I think we all have to start getting used to the norm that pets are here. There's more dogs in San Francisco than there are children. So we need to look at it as a price loss if we don't allow pets. So you almost have to think of it as 5 to 10% less of what market rent is if we don't allow pets. We all just have to kind of get used to that.
And also, when speaking with landlords of a single-family home, I always suggest that they offer pets negotiable, only because a lot of people have pets, and so I think they'd be reducing the chances of getting the kind of tenant they would like if they did not offer pets negotiable.
Yeah, that grew during the pandemic too, right?
Right,
We all
definitely.
saw that everybody got a dog or a cat. I also think that just in general, in the climate of California, we've certainly seen probably a lot more reasonable accommodation requests for the emotional support, assistance animals, etc. And that's becoming much more the norm. You're going to lose tenants if you're not going to be willing to work with pets. But obviously, within guidelines legally, you can work with those parameters if it's a pet and not an emotional support, assistance, reasonable accommodation animal. There's different parameters with that.
Last question. What trends or changes do you foresee in the market over the next 1 or 2 years?
Well, 2 years is a long time, but I feel like San Francisco has hit bottom. Price is going to go up, but slowly. I mean, it's not going to, but I feel like we've kind of hit a stable point in terms of rental pricing, but things will go up slowly. That's the sense, at least the next year. These people are moving back, which is very exciting. It's a great city, and I see, I forgot to mention that people are moving back from their parents' home, the South Bay. So I don't see rents going down anymore.
Crossing fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah, one thing that maybe is a bit more longer term than just the next 1 or 2 years is, I think, continued demographic changes to keep note of. The aging population, the baby boomers are in the middle of, their retirement years now. And there seems to be, a growing trend towards renting as a lifestyle choice, not just because you can't afford to buy your own apartment or a house because you want to rent. And I think over the last few years, we've seen a great proportion of females, especially highly educated females, who are choosing to rent for longer and to an older age group. And I think that's something that, you know, to be aware of and to think about in terms of your marketing, that there is a growing older demographic of single people and of people who, you know, want to choose to rent because of the lifestyle and the amenities rather than just owning their own house.
How are you gonna approach the tenant registration?
How are we gonna approach
How are you
it?
gonna deal with the, you know, we have as of March 1st, we have implemented law, right? So you have to register all your tenants. So
I think
any
there's
tenant
information-
subject or what's the deal?
Do we have information on the SFAA website about this yet? Because I'm not sure everyone here is gonna be an expert on rent registrations as much as they are in the market, but.
So March 1st was the deadline for the unit registration. If you go onto the Rent Board website, they have a whole section with frequently asked questions. We also had our January member meeting. Christina Barner and Dave Wasserman did a whole presentation on it and kind of updated members, what you're supposed to do, what to look out for, how they've updated everything. You can also go on our website. Michelle Hornick-Cohen did a great video that walks you through it. So there is information on our website, and it's also on the Rent Board website.
I know that I'm the realtor and I'm quite familiar, but I want to see the real people approach to this problem. And you guys dealing with.
I don't know, that's more of a legal, I guess.
$100 an hour, we can talk about.
I'll give you the referral.
Sir.
Yeah, what about furnished rental? What kinds of trends are you seeing for furnished rentals, please?
Furnished rentals, what kind of trends you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, that's driven towards corporate, so there is a decline with furnished rentals, given the corporate travel is down. So I definitely see a decline in that market.
There are some coming back though. I mean, before COVID, of course, it was very popular. But because we're limited to a one-year lease in San Francisco, a lot of people are not doing short-term furnished rentals anymore. That would also be a legal issue to talk to somebody about, talk to a lawyer about.
You know, I would say the same. You know, we had some prior to the pandemic students that maybe had wanted furnished rentals or something like that, or were working with court perhaps and doing those packages. And certainly I know they're still out there. But again, as she mentioned with ILO ordinance, the 12-month parameters that are there, and again, the restrictions for corporate also, with you can only rent to a 501c3 or that they're housing teachers, that has certainly limited the desire that we've seen for having furnished rentals, and especially those that would be short-term.
If you have a separate utility paid by your tenants, and then there's only an electrical heater, during the past few years, all the skyrocketed of the utility prices, do you allow them to use the fireplaces as supported, or we can strictly say that that's a fireplace?
So that is
Can you repeat the question?
So the question was that with the high electricity bills, do you allow tenants now with higher electricity bills use the fireplaces if there's a fireplace in the apartment? Am I understanding that right?
Yeah.
So we actually have in all our leases an inoperable or an operable fireplace addendum, depending on the client, depending on the building, depending on the owner, or I'm sorry, depending on the unit. So it depends on the unit. Some fireplaces we allow tenants to use. We just have an addendum that says, you know, you can only use your Duraflame, you can't burn plastic or metal in there, you have to follow the spare the air day laws, all that kind of, all the legal jargon. But we haven't had a client approach us for using it for heat purposes just quite yet. But I guess it's just depends. Yeah. I wouldn't personally have a problem with it, but it depends on the building.
We'll take two more questions, hopefully leasing or sales related. Go ahead. Pardon? I'm not sure, what's the question on ADUs?
ADUs, and we're questioning like, how does it fare on the market? Are they less desirable? Are there certain design aspects that make them more desirable?
Great question. Well, we know it'd be great if they had a washer dryer, but that's the way.
Well, as long as it's a legal unit, we can advertise it, but it has to be an authorized unit, so, it would be a good
I
on the
think
market.
a lot of times they're in a location, right, that was an afterthought to put an apartment in, right? They're in a low floor. So, yeah, making up for that negative aspect with better amenities or finishes might be really helpful. Any way that you can add more light, because a lot of times they're street level or even just a half a story below, so. All right, one more question?
You touched on this earlier, which is, putting in a charging station for Tesla vehicles. So what would you say the percentage of renters, high-end renters who are looking for that? And is that
I do find a lot of tenants, like in my units in the marina where we only have 10 units, that's easily, we can put that in, but some of the older buildings in lower pack heights or pack heights where they don't allow that. I mean, it was a deal killer on 2 of my buildings. So even though Whole Foods is right across the street, we get a supercharger, they still want it right there.
There's a lot of fast charging stations in the city, like right here, down the street, there's a bunch around.
If a tenant wants it, you can put it in, I would definitely put it in, it's very useful. And
And how much does it cost to put it in, and how much more rent do you get?
well, I would build back, you can build back my landlords build back the electrical use, because how much more can you?
The cost is gonna depend on the circumstances, how far you are from your panel, can your panel support that much more service? I mean, there's a lot of electrical questions there.
Check with your utility company as well, because in the past there have been incentive programs where they pay to actually install them, so you don't have to pay to have them installed, and that's, the utility companies are sponsoring that. I don't know if they're still around or not, but certainly check.
Great.
What kind of utility company? What
PG&E, people like that.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. It was great to see everyone in person.